Dr. Mushtaq Ali Abbasi. Dr. Mushtaq Ali Abbasi is PhD in History from Cairo University, Pakistan, Islamabad. He is a faculty member in the Department of History and Pakistan Studies at Formal Christian College, Lahore. Signed, Dr. Mushtaq Ali Abbasi.
Thank you so much, sir.
Just to remind you that we've got a lot of speakers and we are running out of time. If you could limit your speech about 5 minutes, please, that would be much more appreciated.
Thank you so much. Before I would start my speech, I would highlight some things and issues like Dr. Amir Abdul gave a good speech on Sindh and the discrimination or grievances of Sindh. The first thing is that not only the central government is responsible in creating all the problems for Sindhi nation, but also our own politicians are more responsible. Before I will start my speech, I need to raise some questions which will address which are addressed in my speech. The topic of my presentation is the politics of one unit and the interest of Tricol, a case study of Sindh. The questions are how Sindh was merged into one unit, what were the interests of Tricol, like politicians, bureaucracy, and the military in the politics of Sindh and its resources, what was the role of the major political parties and personalities in the process of centralizing power in Pakistan, how the civil military, bureaucracy and politicians at central province level created problems for Sindh and developed a path to the one unit scheme. The separation of Sindh from Bombay presidency was one of the most significant events in the process that led to the creation of Pakistan. Sindh was the first among other Muslim majority provinces of India which passed the resolution in the year 1942 in favor of Pakistan on the hope that it would get full provincial autonomy after independence. But in constructive phase, the province was alienated from its resources and her political and administrative conditions were made worse. In March 1949, when objective resolution was passed, Basic Principles Committee was appointed, a subcommittee of the Basic Principles Committee on Federal and Provincial Constitution proposed a bicameral system for upcoming constitution and divided seats in 4 wings for lower and upper house. The representation of province in upper house was impartial, but in lower house was unjustified. Not only greater population province of Bengal, but all other minority provinces of West Pakistan were discriminated in their representation because the central government, whose place was in the West Pakistan, wished to support and make a stronger Punjab. In the BBC Basic Principles Committee report, the provincial autonomy of East Pakistan and all other minority provinces of West Pakistan were put at risk. The Imros and the Nawaiba described the provision of the report as a negation of provincial autonomy and a mockery of federalism. When complete report of Basic Principles Committee was presented, it had not relinquished the reservation of Bengal and minor provinces of West Pakistan. Finally, the priority formula was introduced. The formula could not meet the reservation of Bengal and minority units of West Pakistan. So first time it was proposed to reduce the number of units in West Pakistan by merging Bahawalpur state with Punjab, Khyber state with Sindh, the Balochistan states union with Balochistan, and the frontier states with the frontier province. By futility of above proposals, new proposal was carried out to merge all units of West Pakistan into single unit in order to curtail the populous majority of East Bengal. Prior to this, other factors were also considerable in destroying political, economic, and administrative system of Sindh. The administration was destabilized by a central government decision to move Sindh capital from Karachi to Hyderabad. Secondly, economic position was weakened by heavy influx of refugees and their rehabilitation process. Thirdly, the political system was deteriorated by dismissing provincial governments with the usage of Your District Section 92(8) of the Government of India Act 1925. Finally, after a few years, in October 1954, Governor General Ghulam Muhammad had dismissed the Constituent Assembly and declared a state of emergency. At the same time, he put forth the introduction of one unit in motion, which abolished boundaries of West Pakistan. One unit was condemned by all units in East and West Pakistan except Punjab on the grounds that it assigned them permanent conditions of inferiority. In Sindh, the announcement of one unit resulted with the dismissal of Pirzada Ministry on October 8, 1954. Prior to this, his notion was closely linked with the need to preserve Sindh's provincial status within the constitution. Before his dismissal, 74 legislative members had supported his opposition to the merger plan. However, by the time the Sindh legislature met on December 11, the only opponents of merger were Pirzada, Ghulam Haider Shah, G.M. Sayyid, and two of his supporters. The opposition in Sindh was dealt with the simple and brutal method. The Speaker of the Sindh Assembly was arrested and taken into the desert as soon as it was known that he was about to oppose the one unit bill, and other opponents were dealt with by the similar method. G.M. Sayyid, who opposed any kind of zonal merger and insisted on constitutional changes recognizing the maximum provincial autonomy of the existing provinces of Pakistan, was arrested in response to his opposition to the unification plan, and his newspaper Al-Wahid, along with another Sindhi newspaper, Karma, was banned for apparently publishing news and views, which is allegedly written in the newspapers, that these newspapers were inciting the peoples of Sindh to mass agitation and violence not only in Sindh but in West Pakistan as well. The Prime Minister Muhammad Ali Bogra in November 1954 called a meeting of provincial chiefs, and in this meeting it was said that the one unit move had been decided on and the center had discretionary powers to implement its decision. Means the Sindhi people or the politicians had no voice to reject this scheme. Finally, when the one unit scheme was passed, Foreign Ministry and his supporters presented few things before the central government, which are to provide constitutional safeguards for Sindh, the income for Sindh to be spent on the province, government jobs in Sindh to go to Sindhis and to be overseen by Sindhis, surplus land only, if any leftover, to be sold off as government decides, quota for Sindh to be fixed in the central government, adequate funding for Sindhi language and culture for which Sindh government had allocated initial amounts, reasonable share for Sindhis in defense services, no law to be imposed on Sindh against the wishes of the majority of its members. All these points, which were presented by a youth ministry, were very foolish. Because if we analyze these points, the Constitutional Assembly was abrogated by the Governor General, then how could the Sindhi people or the government of Sindh was expecting the constitutional safeguard for Sindh? When the promise was abrogated and given in the hands of others, then how were they expecting and demanding the income which would generated from promise would be spent on the same promise? The main objective of the central government, and which was also the prime argument of the Prime Minister, that the objective of one unit scheme was to form a single economic unit. It was obvious not possible in terms of administrative reforms that the government jobs in Sindh should go to the province. Sindh government did not frame an agriculture policy within 7 years. Now they were expecting that the agricultural land would be given to landless cultivators of Sindh. The GMC thought that the one unit scheme was the strategic policy of the bureaucrats and armed forces to make minority province a colony of the central government. Regarding surplus land, the question arising here is that which government had powers to sell surplus land? Though I have short of time, one thing I would like to share over here is that the one unit scheme or the one unit was dissolved in 1971. When one unit was implemented in 1955, all the historical data of Sindh was shifted from Sindh to Lahore. Even when one unit was dissolved in 1971, the data of Sindh was not get back by the Sindh government. Last year, I had a talk with the Speaker of Sindh Assembly. I told him that please, 40 years had been gone and we are still waiting of our cultural, historical, political data. Why we are not requesting the Punjab government, why we are not writing the Punjab government to send back the material of the historical material of Sindh. Still, the action was not taken and is not taken by the Sindh government, and we are still waiting that other people will safeguard our historical data, our history, our culture, our politics. Thank you so much.